because I'm a good Mormon boy, and I don't even drink alcohol. But there's something that I have in common, hopefully, with every one of you here. And that is that I love liberty. I love freedom. I think that it should be our choice of what we do with our bodies. And so I have a little message here for you, and I hope that you can bear with me, because I actually wrote it out. But I think it'll be sufficient for today, because I want to say something very specific. So around the late 1930s, the church-going, family-raising, tax-paying, keeping up with the Joneses, working at the factory and driving a new Ford car, American country man made a decision. The decision was to decide with the fat cats controlling the growing government and big corporations. Upon a series of propaganda tactics concocted by the fat cats, deliberately ensuing fear to sway the self-righteousness of church-going Christians into agreeing to destroy an industry that benefited every family in America more than any other industry recorded in the annals of time. Simply said, the corporate fat cats deceived the American family man and woman into believing that a plant proven to be more beneficial to mankind than any other plant was somehow wicked. And it was the Christian churchgoers' God-loving duty to stop the use of this divisive plant. The cigar-smoking corporate tycoons lining lobbyists' pockets while enjoying the entertainment at the local gentleman's club made a brilliant plan to convince the church-going saints that they must religiously support them to stop the growing of this plant, so the wickedness would not run rampant in the streets of America. Sound familiar? This confederation, built upon deception and naivety, has been the cause of not only major economic losses in goods, services, and invention in America, but it gave grounds to the massive incarceration of fellow Americans that caused no harm to any person, that did no damage to anyone. A farmer could go to prison for 20 years for simply growing a plant. The same plant that all the school books were made from in America until the 1880s. The same plant that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and many of our founding fathers grew as their main crop. The same plant that Benjamin Franklin used to produce paper in one of the first mills in America. The same plant that for thousands of years, 90% of all ship sails and ropes were made from. The same plant that 80% of all textiles, fabrics, cloths, linens, drapes, bed sheets, prior to making it illegal, were made in America. The same plant that our first Bibles, maps, charts, Betsy Rose's flag, the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution were made from. From a popular mechanics article dated February 1938, we read about this plant. Quote, it has a short growing season. It can be grown in any state. The long roots penetrate and break the soil to leave a perfect condition for the next year's crop. The dense shock of leaves, 8 to 12 feet above the ground, choke out weeds. This new crop can add immeasurable to American agriculture industry. In the 1930s, innovation in farm machinery would have caused an industrial revolution. When applied to this plant, this single resource could have created millions of new jobs, generated thousands of quality products. If not made illegal, would have brought America out of the Great Depression. Instead, the plant was accepted as the devil plant, designed so competing big business and growing governments could control and get gain to keep it out of the use of the American people's lives. The Christian American fell for the idea that a plant was evil. They invented a false good, and they became convinced that by force a person can be compelled to do that good. There's no greater wickedness than one person trying to force another person to be good. Not only is it extremely wicked and contrary to the purpose in which we are here on this earth, but it is impossible. You cannot force another person to be good any more than you can force someone to love you. No law can force a person to love another person. No law can force another person to be good. Now, as you may know, you may or may not know, that I spent 2 years in federal prison. I was never convicted of even a misdemeanor. But during that time, I learned a lot of things. And almost a year of that time I spent in solitary confinement. And I have a couple stories I want to share with you. When I was in solitary confinement, I was locked in a box. Again, I was in there for almost a year. And one time I was looking out the little crack, and I was looking into the open space where I was in, and it was a big open corridor, and there was 2 layers, upper layer and lower level of prison cells. And there was about 100 feet between the two. And while I was looking out this little crack, I saw something float from a bottom cell clear across the 100-foot corridor up to an upper cell. And I watched it in amazement. It just floated. It floated from one to the other. So it intrigued me, and of course I had a little extra time on my hands. So I just started to watch. And pretty soon I watched something come from the top cell down to the bottom. And I realized that these prisoners in solitary confinement, the most restricted place ever in anywhere, I guess, especially in the United States, these prisoners were passing drugs back and forth to each other. And what they had done is they had taken a bag that they had their stuff in that the guards gave them, and they had stripped the bag and pulled it and spun it and made their own string. Then the one on the top tied it to a soap bar, and he threw it under his door, and it bounced off and went down the middle of the corridor. Then the other one took a little comb, and he threw it under his door and caught the soap bar and the string and pulled it over to them, and then they were able to use it to pass things back and forth. So that's story number 1. Story number 2 is when I was in maximum security, they locked us down and did a drug raid because there was drugs in the prison. Now they went from cell to cell to cell with dogs and men, and they tore every cell apart, and they found everything that they could find with their dogs and their sniffing drugs and the men. And they were in that pod for 3 days. 3 days with dogs. And on the end of the 3rd day, they left, and we were all locked in the whole time. They left and the door shut. And it wasn't 5 minutes after I could smell someone smoking marijuana. Now the point of this is you cannot force people to be good. And your version of good might actually not be good anyway. Now, between January 17, 1920 and December 5th, 1933, the American people had a tremendous opportunity to learn a great lesson. Between these dates, alcohol in America was prohibited. Once before, well-intended Christian people thought that force was the answer to make their fellow countrymen stop drinking alcohol. By so doing, a black market was established. Alcohol consumption in America rose beyond anyone's imagination, creating the mob, well-funded I might say, and in response, the jails were filling up and the federal government initiated the FBI. After 11 years of complete failure, U.S. Congress was wise enough to end the prohibition on alcohol, but they weren't wise enough to end the FBI with it. The FBI moved their focus from alcohol to drugs, and now after 70 years of justifying their paychecks and existence fighting the endless war on drugs, they are transitioning to subdue the American patriot, something they classify as the greatest danger to America. And the reason I spent 2 years in federal prison, never convicted of any crime. I wonder how this is going to go for us this time, right? My friends, when will we, as the American people, ever learn this one lesson? You cannot force people to be good. Thank you for your time.